All right, back to America's Voice Live on a Monday. Good to have you here. Fastest growing news program in America. We appreciate it too, by the way. It's you that makes it happen. Now, do you remember when Elon Musk said all the conspiracy theories about Twitter turned out to be true? Well, the same could start being said about COVID. Because all we heard for the longest time was that the virus did not come from a lab, even though the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the most likely outbreak source. I said that from day one. It turned out to be most certainly true. But apparently it was anti-science and even racist to suggest that a virus leaked from a lab. Then we were told the vaccine worked perfectly. It would stop the transmission. If you were vaccinated, you couldn't spread the virus, you were good to go. And anyone who said they didn't, well, they were just anti-science. Turns out that was wrong too, obviously. And remember all those reports about the United States overcounting COVID deaths? Why, that was a conspiracy theory too, except now top COVID fearmongers are now admitting that, yes, we overcounted cases. People like Dr. Lena Wen, who for years warned us to stay in our homes, lock ourselves up, mask up, get covered in cellophane and get hermetically sealed and never talk to anyone. So why now is this happening? By the way, Dr. Wen said the overcount could be 70%. That would mean that of the 1,070,000 deaths attributed to COVID-19 over the last couple of years would be reduced to about 300,000, which seems a lot more possible. Here to discuss it, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, but he does much more than that, the numbers magician, Dr. John Lott. Dr. John Lott, always good to see you, my friend.
Well, good to talk to you. Thanks for having me on.
John, I ran this bit of numbers way back when this whole thing started, and the hysteria was really starting to ramp up. Oh, it's worse than the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu killed indiscriminately, and if you had the same population in America today as what you had then, by comparison, percentage of those that died, you'd have 2.2 million dead Americans. The way the Spanish flu killed people. Now we're told the death toll is more like 300,000. I mean, this isn't just being off by a bit. It's being off by 700,000 deaths that were attributed to create hysteria and fear. I find it inexcusable. I find it angering. What do you say?
Well, I think you have a right to be upset about it. Look, they were counting COVID deaths in a way differently than we've ever counted deaths from any other type of disease. There's no other country in the world that was counting it the way we were. If somebody died and they had COVID, then the death was immediately attributed to COVID. But it was even worse than that. There were 5 states that were doing COVID tests on all dead bodies. New York, for example. But 37% of the people that they had listed as dying from COVID actually tested negative for the virus, and so the problem that you have is that the false negative rate for these virus tests are like 3 or 4%. There's no way that you could possibly justify having 37%.
Well, there's several things here we can point to. First of all, in the fall of 2020, going into 2021, they stopped counting influenza cases altogether in America. Somehow we magically had no flu in the flu season of 2020 and 21. Completely unbelievable. We always have a few million cases of flu in America. They went to 0. They were telling us that all these cases were COVID-related. There was a case that I read about in April of 2020 out of Macomb County, Michigan. A young man committed suicide, took his life with a gun. During the autopsy, they tested him for COVID. He was positive, so they considered that and registered that as a COVID death. He committed suicide with a firearm. COVID had nothing to do with his death, but that was one easy example early on, and so I never trusted the numbers. And how could we ever trust any of the numbers going forward?
No, but that's exactly right. If you died and if you had COVID, they automatically assumed that the death was due to COVID. So it wasn't just suicides. You had people dying from automobile accidents, young people who died from automobile accidents that were being classified as COVID deaths. As I said, we've never done something like that before for any type of disease. But you mentioned the flu. We've had recent years where as many as 60,000 people have died from the flu. what they would do here, as you say, flu deaths seem to just completely disappear from the numbers. If somebody had a runny nose, if they had a fever, those were things that many places would use just to classify the death as a COVID death. So again, that's not the way we've ever done these types of things before. But the problem is that the way that they've classified these deaths make it so we can't compare the COVID deaths to any other past disease in the United States history.
That's right.
And we also can't compare our death numbers to any other country. Because
That's right.
not only was
there was no standard. You are an economist by trade, right? So numbers have been your thing ever since you went to,
Right.
probably grade school. Numbers are your thing. If you don't have a standard by which you're measuring something, if you can't measure it and quantify it, the numbers are useless, aren't they?
Right. No, I agree. I mean, if you worry about the bad motives that people have for this type of stuff, for exaggerating it, because I worry that they may have been doing this just to make Trump look bad by making this look worse than past diseases, and in particular, make it look like the United States was somehow performing poorly in terms of how it was dealing with the COVID situation compared to other countries. Whereas I think if you actually looked at the numbers correctly, we actually did very well. But it wasn't just that we were defining it differently. There were a number of countries that were actually purposely doing the opposite, undercounting COVID deaths that were there. But the media would have nothing of either type of voice. We at the Crime Prevention Research
I got to get to this before I'm almost out there. But here's the thing that also bothers me, John. We're a little tight on them, but they kept moving the age brackets lower and lower and lower for who they said it needed to get the
Right.
injection.
vaccine,
To the
right.
point they brought it all the way down to 6 months. The total number of people 18 and under this country that died from COVID, I'll just go ahead and assume that that's correct, 1,500. 1,500.
Right.
In a bad flu season, 1,500 kids under 18 would die, and then some. I mean, the fact that they were forcing these kids to get this jab is outrageous. I'll give you the last word.
Right. No, I mean, you're exactly right. And the reason why they gave for why young children should do it is that they could, you had to stop them from being able to go and pass on the disease to other people. But it turns out that the vaccine makers were never asked to and didn't test to see whether or not it stopped you from getting it, whether it stopped you from being able to go and pass it on. It turns out
That's right.
What the vaccine did was it lessened the symptoms that people had. But as you say, even the people under 18,
I don't even know if I believe that anymore.
Cancer or other things.
They have no credibility because they have no integrity, any of these people. So the point is, you can't believe any of it at this point. Anyhow,
Right.
we've got to leave it there. They destroyed any integrity or credibility they had with all the things and games they played. Dr. John Lott, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.